This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Osio Hideda J. Lee, welcome. We come before you now at this time and in this way in our part 2 of our Uyoi, excuse me, haven't had enough coffee this morning. Uyo Ayeladi Ale Uyo Han Selan, grief and loss. And so this morning I want to get things going here with a reading today. This is a little workbook called Healing and Hope, Sustaining Strength Through Life's Battles, and it's written by U.S. veteran chaplains. Military chaplains or veteran chaplains. And this particular reading today comes from John, chapter 5 through 9, and it's entitled Hope and Healing, Do We Really Want It? By Chaplain Robert Price from Hampton, Virginia. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been a long time in that condition, he said to him, "Do you wish to get well?" At first reading, we may be shocked to see Jesus ask the man if he wishes to get well. It seems like a cold response. Obviously, the man wishes to get well, doesn't he? Why would Jesus ask this question? I believe the answer is found in the man's response. He makes excuses. For 38 years, this man had been hanging out where it's crowded with other sick people. It doesn't sound like a pleasant place to be. It probably smelled bad and was very uncomfortable. When Jesus asked if the man wanted to be well, the man answered other people were to blame for his situation. Jesus' response was to empower him to take ownership in his healing. Sometimes we too make excuses and blame others for our situation, when there really is much for which we are responsible and capable of improving our circumstances. Sometimes our sense of self-identity changes, and we become comfortable with being known as sick or an addict. This scripture reminds me of a veteran who went from a state of addiction to being healthy and whole, simply because he became tired of being known as an addict. He acknowledged to himself he had a problem and worked to change. In short, he picked up his pallet and walked. Now, I bring this up today because when it comes to grief and loss, many people, especially since we experience hard losses in early childhood, many people become comfortable with their pain and discomfort. They normalize it. They live in a state of survival and come to enjoy their suffering. They find it to be numb. It's better to, what was that phrase I heard one time? It was in a movie I was watching, one of them southern, cowboy movies, I think. It's better to live with the devil you know than the devil you don't know. And so they don't make the effort to pick up their pallet and walk. And in this case, when that's the impetus behind doing grief and loss work. You get comfortable with that pain and suffering that you're in. You get comfortable with not being in the best possible relationship you could be with God, with your family, and with your community. So you choose to stay in your suffering. You stay in your grief and you stay in your suffering because you're used to it. So you're focused on surviving, and then instead of thriving. And doing the work helps you to move past surviving and thriving. And yes, it can be challenging. The question is, are you, when Jesus asks you, do you want to be healed, which Jesus is asking you right now, do you want to be healed? Or do you want to stay in your pain? Are you going to blame others? Or are you going to take ownership and make them do the work? I bring this up because we're looking at, in part 2, kind of review a little bit of what we talked about last video. And just as a reminder, you can look up on the homepage, the front page of the website, and download a copy of this workbook. I'm not going to say this workbook's perfect. It is a tool, and it's to help you to move through this process. And I remind you that last time we talked about, using the labyrinths here, both of them, as ways of coping with stress and anxiety, and then also learning to identify your emotions using the emotions wheel. Here's the emotions wheel I put in this packet to include, so that you can understand the difference between all the feelings that you have when you think about each loss that you have experienced. We talked about what is loss last week, and we talked about the loss inventory. Now, the assignment that I gave to everyone last week was to make a list of your childhood losses, and this was for you to be able to start firing those neurons in the old brain to remember where it all began. Go back as far as you can remember to identify, when did you first experience grief and loss? When did you first normalize how you cope with that grief and loss and come to accept? What would your parents tell you? Pull yourself up by your bootstraps, or get over it, or wash it off. You're in pain and suffering and you're crying, and then maybe your parent told you to walk it off or wash it off. Those pretty normal Southern phrases that we got growing up here, and yet what it does is it makes us stuff all those feelings down instead of coping with it in a healthy way. And people did the best they could, and now's an opportunity to do different. And so when you think about your childhood losses, it includes, did a pet run away? Did one die? I can tell you, when I was like 6 years old, I liked to grow watermelons, and the neighbor's dog, there was something, they had one of those pit bulls, and bit me on the leg, and they got in trouble for it because, we're on a military base, and the rules are pretty strict about this stuff. And so they poisoned my Chihuahua pet, my pet Chihuahua I had at the time. They killed it. They poisoned it. And so, it caused a lot of trouble. And so when my pet died, that was a loss for me. I still remember it. Here I am, 57 years old, and I remember what my little Chihuahua being killed when I was 6 years old. So these things, they stay on. They stay on. The memories never go away, but how we feel about it, that can change. So you have, did you move? Did family members die? All these things can happen. There's all kinds of losses in life. Not only from childhood, and then our teens. There's all kinds of losses in our teens and in our adulthood. And as we get older, they become more significant in the sense that we are more consciously aware of how they impact us, not only emotionally, but financially. Our support systems change. It can be pretty dramatic. So, in that sense, we think about what do we need to do different to help us move through that process. I'm going to pause for a second. Go ahead and turn those on, Jerry. I forgot about it.
It's plenty bright.
Just go ahead and turn them on. And so when we're thinking about that, we turn a little more light. So when we think about all of these losses, I'd like to encourage you to keep going back to the emotions group and identify, own take ownership for your feelings for each of those losses. And you focus on the three most significant losses. Now in this session here, now that you've got those three significant losses identified, we're going to move to session 2, which is telling our story. Every loss needs 100 tellings. And the importance of storytelling, let me talk about that a little bit. The old ones tell us that storytelling is an essential part of life. Many cultures throughout the world greatly value the art of storytelling. Stories entertain us, they inspire us, they educate us, and also help us to make sense of the world and our life's experiences, dilemmas, and hardships. Stories can also help us build rapport with and connection, emotional connection to family, friends, and community. Stories are a means of communicating, recreating, and helping preserve cultures by translating memories into a more concrete manner. Verbally sharing a written story can provide the opportunity to gain a deeper understanding of one's experiences and oneself. In other words, you come to know yourself better. We each have unique stories, unlike any other. Our stories are constantly changing and being rewritten, reconstructed, even discarded from the moment we are born. Our stories help us to make sense of our situation and the world around us. Hearing others' stories can also help us to reflect on and explore ways of doing, feeling, thinking, and behaving. We actually learn our coping skills and our morals, our values, our beliefs from other people and through hearing stories. So it's really important. Creating a story about one's life experiences, one's losses, can also help improve physical and mental health. Storytelling can be regarded as one of the oldest healing arts. It has been used for centuries, actually millennia, as a universal, useful way for the grieving person to cope with their losses and to keep the memory of loved ones alive. The losses you experienced in childhood determine how you have responded to losses ever since and will continue to determine how you respond to your losses yet to come. Unless you use your ability to change your perceptions of your losses and make something good come true. Are you willing to choose to create the story of your loss or losses and make a change? Storytelling is integral to indigenous culture. Stories share actual experiences, actual memories, and also stories help to inspire us. We have a whole bunch of them. We have all kinds of stories in Cherokee culture. We have loads of them. And so you think about that. In your life, how have stories helped and benefited you? In what ways? Emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually? How have they helped you? And then it comes time for you to share your story. To write the story of your losses. Like I said, in the other assignments, nobody's going to see this except you, unless you want to email it to me, which is fine. And on the workbook are the email, that webpage and email address. And so you can focus on writing your story, either for yourself, your family, friends, or community. And here's the assignment. I'd like you to focus on the three most significant losses out of all of your list. You go back to your list. You identify throughout your life the three most significant losses that you've experienced in your life. And like you sit with those three for a little while as you ponder them and choose which one, or if there's more than one interconnected, which ones represent the most significant, and write that story out. Or you may want to write out all three different stories. it's your call. I encourage you to do that over time anyway. But to start with, write the first story. I know that it can be hard for many people to actually start putting this down on paper. Putting it on paper makes it real, makes it a historical event. I talked a bit about this in the first video. When you actually start telling your story, verbally you can tell your story and it's like an entertainment. Yeah, you know, this happened and this is how I felt about it and this is what the events were. And you keep changing, constructing, and modifying the story, but it's also surreal. It's different from reading a book, reading an article about an event, seeing photographs of an earthquake, or a flood, or a funeral. It's different from that because there's still plausible deniability. There's nothing that can say, oh yeah, this actually happened. You actually have to face it and say, this did happen. It's like going to the cemetery and looking at the gravestone. When you hear about a family member dying, you can still pretend they're alive. Until you go to the cemetery and you see the gravestone. And you can't pretend anymore. It becomes real. It's a historical event. There's a gravestone with the name on it and the dates on it. You can't get away from it. So it is with the story of your significant loss, whatever they are. It may not necessarily be a death. It could be a divorce, could be moving from one place to another, losing a job, whatever. Whatever your most significant loss was. When you start writing it down, it gets real. It becomes a historical fact. These events happen, you can't change it. And it's important to write the story down in order for you to be able to say, put the walls around it, so to speak. If this is a real event, here it is. That chapter, you know, basically you're closing the chapter on that part of your life. You still remember that chapter, but it's not an active part of your life anymore. The characters and the players, family members, they become the story now, and not the living person in your consciousness, in your awareness. So I encourage you to start writing the story down. And I know it can be hard. Take your time with it. Remember to breathe. Use the finger levers. You know, practice some relaxation exercise. If it becomes overwhelming, I'll remind you again, you know, send us email. Do our best to answer everyone. If you need to talk to a counselor, go find a counselor. If you need to get a support group, contact a local hospice. Many of them have support groups. Do what you need to do to help you be able to move through the writing of the story process. And you're writing the story about how this makes you feel. When this event took place, it made me feel this. And you tell the story and the whole story. That's the most important part of this process that you can do in order to develop it. We're going to get into including the stages of grief, because you know your story is going to change. It's going to progress over time, and you know, it's a little different for me to sit here and film it. I'm used to talking to people, getting feedback. And, you know, working through the process of helping them to make peace with telling the story. I know I've had people who have just started crying at the very idea of writing the story, writing down what actually happened, especially the loss of the most significant loved one in their lives. And how hard it's been for many people to actually do it. So I understand that it's not an easy thing that you're being challenged to do. It is an integral part of the healing process. As the reading for today and the information we got today is you're acknowledging your feelings, you're taking ownership of them, and you're moving past the grief and loss into the healing process. It's a huge transition. It's really important for your health and well-being, for the health and well-being of your pets, your family members, your immediate friends, your support system, your relationship with God, that you make this effort. You still have the rest of your life to look forward to. And it may sound very difficult right now, maybe challenging for you to think that anything could possibly get better. And it will. It does. Just the effort you put into this so far, you can probably think about how that has helped you already. And as you continue to move through this process, it's going to help you even more. So sit down, pick a day, a time, make a commitment over the next few days to actually sit down and start doing this, whether you type it on your computer or handwrite it. And most people I've been worked with in grief and loss groups that I facilitate one-on-one most often tend to handwrite it out. Whatever you feel good about is okay with me. You just go for it. And go back to your emotions wheel. Identify your emotions, what you're going through as you experience this process so that we can tie it into the stages of grief on the next session. And remember, you're not alone. You're not alone. You're connected to many who are also experiencing grief and loss, and God is with you every step of the way. That's the promise. We talked about that last time, how Esau blessed. He made that commitment he said, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." That's from Matthew 5, 1 through 12. He made that commitment and provided the Comforter to us to help us in this process. So we know Adonado, the Holy Spirit, is with us always in this process, and will continue to guide and support you and offer you blessing as you do the work to own your feelings and to say to Jesus, "Yes, I want to be here." Until next time, be well. Right up. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.